You've probably noticed it before without really thinking about it. Two identical products sitting on a store shelf, same brand, same size, same ingredients. But the one labeled for women costs more. Sometimes a little more. Sometimes significantly more. This isn't random pricing. It's not accidental. It's a documented systemic pattern called the pink tax, and it's quietly draining billions of dollars from women's lifetime earnings and investment potential every single year. If you care about wealth inequality, financial justice, or understanding the hidden costs that shape economic outcomes, hit subscribe. We're diving into how something as ordinary as buying a razor or shampoo becomes a structural barrier to building wealth. The pink tax isn't really a tax at all. There's no government legislation creating it. No formal rule. Instead, it's the gap between what women are charged and what men are charged for functionally identical products. The term gained real traction after research by New York City's Consumer Affairs Department in 2015. Their study compared hundreds of products across dozens of categories. What they found was striking. Women paid more on average. Sometimes the markup was small. But across a lifetime of purchases, it accumulates into a staggering sum. Consider the math for a moment. If a woman overpays by just $2 per week on personal care products alone, that's roughly $104 per year. Over 50 years of adult life, that's $5,200. But that number misses the real cost. That $5,000 could have been invested. At a modest 7% annual return, it would grow to nearly $40,000. The pink tax doesn't just take money today, it steals compound growth tomorrow. The products affected span categories you use without thinking much about it. Razors, shampoo, conditioner, deodorant, dry cleaning, haircuts, even basic clothing items. A dress shirt and a blouse, made by the same manufacturer from the same material, sometimes carry different prices. Women's versions often cost 15 to 20% more. In some categories, the gap reaches 50% or higher. That's not a rounding error. That's a systematic pattern. Why does this happen? The explanation usually offered is that women's products are differently designed. More colors, different packaging, superior formulas. The problem is that when researchers actually compared the products chemically and functionally, many of those claims didn't hold up. A pink razor isn't materially different from a blue one. The blades are identical. The handle design might be marginally different. But does that justify a consistent 20 to 30% price increase? When you examine the evidence closely, the answer is usually no. What you're actually seeing is market segmentation based on gender. Companies have learned that they can charge women more, not because the products cost more to make, but because they believe women will pay it. It's a form of price discrimination, and it works because it's largely invisible. You don't comparison shop between a men's and women's razor. They're marketed differently, positioned differently, sold in different sections. The price gap hides in plain sight. This pattern didn't emerge by accident. It's rooted in decades of gendered marketing that teaches women to see their bodies and their grooming as requiring premium solutions. Advertising tells women they need specially formulated products designed for their unique needs. They're made to feel that generic products are somehow insufficient. The psychological messaging is subtle but powerful. Once that belief is established, the pricing follows naturally. Women aren't just paying for a product. They're paying for the belief that they deserve something special. But let's be clear about what this actually means economically. The pink tax functions as a hidden wealth transfer. Money that could accumulate in women's investment accounts instead flows to corporate profits. Over a lifetime, this compounds into a meaningful gap in net worth. When you multiply this across the millions of women making these purchases every single day, the scale becomes enormous. We're talking about billions of dollars annually flowing from women's pockets into corporate balance sheets based on nothing but perceived differences in willingness to pay. The New York City study was significant because it put rigorous numbers behind what many women already suspected. But it wasn't the only research documenting this pattern. Similar studies have been conducted in other cities and countries. The results are consistent. Women pay more. Not everywhere, but in enough product categories to create a measurable economic drag. The studies also revealed something important. Awareness of the pink tax is still relatively low. Many women don't realize they're systematically overpaying. What makes this pattern particularly insidious is that it's normalized. Women's products cost more, and everyone accepts it as normal market variation. Retailers don't see it as discrimination because it's already embedded in their pricing structures. Manufacturers don't see it as exploitation because competitors are doing the same thing. It becomes structural, invisible, expected. That normalization is exactly what allows it to persist. Now, you might think the obvious solution is simply to buy men's products instead. Some women do. But that choice comes with its own friction and social costs that men never have to navigate. Buy a men's razor as a woman, and you're choosing a product that isn't marketed to you, might not fit your hands comfortably, and carries an implicit message that you're settling for something not made for you. That friction, multiplied across millions of small purchasing decisions, is part of what sustains the pink tax. It's not just a pricing problem. It's a structural design that makes the alternative inconvenient. The impact extends beyond just money. The pink tax represents a form of systemic inequality encoded into everyday transactions. It's a small reminder, repeated hundreds of times per year, that women pay more simply for being women. That message accumulates. It becomes part of the financial landscape women navigate, a landscape structured differently than the one men inhabit. When you understand it this way, the pink tax becomes less about individual consumer choices and more about structural economic disadvantage. Some people dismiss this as trivial, $2 here, $5 there. But that framing misses the systemic nature of the issue. We don't evaluate wealth inequality by looking at single transactions. We look at patterns that compound over time. The pink tax is exactly that kind of pattern. It's not a one-time overcharge. It's a recurring cost built into the structure of consumer markets, affecting virtually every woman across her entire adult life. When you measure it that way, it's enormous. There's another dimension worth considering. The pink tax doesn't affect all women equally. It has a larger proportional impact on lower-income women. A woman earning $30,000 per year feels a $2 price difference much more acutely than a woman earning $300,000. For women living paycheck to paycheck, that cumulative $5,000 over 50 years represents potential emergency savings, childcare expenses, or retirement contributions. The wealth gap widens not just because of salary differences, but because of these structural cost differences that amplify inequality. Some progress has been made on awareness. Cities like New York have started monitoring these patterns. Some retailers have begun to examine their pricing more carefully. But systemic change is slow. The incentives pushing toward the pink tax are powerful. Corporations profit from it. The marketing infrastructure that supports it is well established. Changing the pattern requires either regulatory action or a coordinated shift in consumer behavior, neither of which happens quickly. Regulatory solutions are complicated because the pink tax isn't technically illegal. Products are labeled differently, packaging is different. Companies can argue their pricing reflects legitimate cost differences, even when evidence suggests otherwise. Some jurisdictions have considered tax reforms or consumer protection laws, but enforcement would be difficult. You'd essentially need to define when two products are similar enough that price differences become discriminatory, and that definition is harder than it sounds. The consumer behavior approach is appealing but limited. If women switch to men's products en masse, companies would eventually adjust their pricing or marketing. But that requires coordinated action and an expectation that women should change their behavior rather than companies changing their practices. It also ignores the legitimate product preferences some women have. The solution shouldn't be that women should buy men's products. The solution should be that women's products shouldn't cost more in the first place. What's really interesting is what happens when you zoom out and see the pink tax as part of a larger pattern of economic inequality. Women earn less than men on average. They have less wealth. They retire with smaller nest eggs. The pink tax is one of dozens of structural factors contributing to that gap. It's not the biggest factor, but it's one that's easy to overlook because it's scattered across thousands of small transactions rather than concentrated in a few major decisions. That diffusion makes it harder to address, but it also makes it more pervasive. The solution has to be multifaceted. Greater transparency would help. If companies had to justify the price differences between male and female versions of products, some of those differences would disappear. Consumer awareness matters too. Women who understand they're being systematically overcharged can make more informed choices. Some will choose alternatives. Some will pay anyway, but at least it will be a conscious decision, rather than an invisible one. That consciousness alone changes the dynamic. But ultimately, real change requires corporate accountability. Companies need to feel that the pink tax carries a cost. That might come through regulation, through consumer pressure, or through competitive disadvantage. If some companies eliminate the gap, and gain customer loyalty as a result. It's unlikely to happen without some form of pressure. The incentives are simply too strong in the other direction. What's important to understand is that the pink tax isn't about individual purchasing decisions. It's not about making smart choices at the checkout counter. It's about recognizing a structural economic pattern that disadvantages women systematically and building awareness that enables people to demand change. Like this video if you found that analysis valuable. The more we talk about these hidden costs, the harder they become to ignore. The pink tax matters because wealth inequality matters. It matters because systemic discrimination matters. It matters because the difference between $5,000 and $40,000 in retirement savings is life-changing. And it matters because we should all care about economic systems that treat people fairly. That's the real issue underneath the pricing gap. It's about whether we accept economic structures that systematically transfer resources based on gender, or whether we demand better. As you leave this video, think about the products you buy regularly. Where are you paying more than the comparable alternative? What choices do you make in those moments? Are they truly informed choices, or are they shaped by marketing, packaging, and normalized pricing gaps? Comment below with your experience. Have you noticed the pink tax in your own purchases? Have you found ways to navigate it? Your perspective matters, and the conversation helps others become aware of patterns they might otherwise miss. If this analysis of economic inequality and systemic pricing matters to you, subscribe to the channel. We dive deep into the financial systems that shape outcomes, the patterns people miss, and what happens when we examine them closely. Understanding these structures is the first step toward changing them.